All right, my friends, welcome. Come on in. Thanks for joining me today. J.R. Dukes at your service. Wanted to go ahead and make sure everything's working the way it should. We just hit the go buttons. Hello to everyone on YouTube and, of course, all my friends on the X platform. All right, make sure to turn down my speakers here so everybody can hear me. If you have any issues hearing me or whatnot, feel free, put it in the chat so I know exactly what's going on. So welcome to everybody. If you haven't done so already, please take a moment, introduce yourself. Let me know who you are and where you're from. Makes for a good way to introduce everybody and to say hello. Okay, my friend Sapphire News already in the chat. Thanks for being here today, Sapphire. Appreciate that. All right, looks like everything's working the way it should be working. If you don't have my contact information across the platform, let me go ahead and put that in for everyone. Of course, most of the platforms is simply at J.R. Dukes. And of course, the only exception is on the X platform at Reach J.R. Dukes. So Sapphire, of course, is in the great state of Montana. All right. Talk to my friend all the time, and he's got his own law channel that he likes to have lives. I think you're pretty well on there daily. You can always check him out. I'm sure he'll put his address in the chat at some point, but I believe it's just simply Sapphire Ridge News on YouTube and on the X platform. All right, we're going to go ahead and take a quick peek and let's see what we're going to be talking about today. So thanks for joining me once again. For y'all that are new to the channel, I am J.R. Dukes. I'm your host. If you've been with me before, thanks for returning to the channel. I am all about ending the dreaded disease of indoctrination, the lies, the misinformation. Frankly, we're always on the receiving end of those type of comments that we are spreading misinformation, disinformation. We all know that that is a bunch of nonsense. But anyway, that's what I am all about. And of course, Rosemary Fiera, thank you for being here as always, sweetheart. I definitely appreciate you being here in the chat with us. Okay, let's take a peek and see what we got going on today. Got several topics I want to talk about. I did want to go over the funeral of Jimmy Carter's from last week. Definitely some interesting things that developed in that particular funeral. You don't normally see a lot of news at a funeral, but this particular funeral had some newsworthy events, and we're going to talk about it in this particular stream. I have some things I want to go over on the X platform at my account at Reach J.R. Dukes. Additionally, we have an actual story from BuzzFeed, and it's kind of just their take on the Jimmy Carter funeral. The thing that's outrageous about this funeral that I really want to drill down on is Michelle Obama, the former First Lady, of course, former President Barack Obama's wife, who I absolutely cannot stand. She chose not to show up for this funeral, and I'm going to tell you the reason why. Kind of interesting. I also want to talk about the fact that soon to be, again, President Donald Trump-elect. Can't wait for Monday. It's going to be a great day in our country. Hallelujah. Thank you, Jesus. Appreciate Donald Trump coming back home. I saw some signs today on one of the newscasts there in Washington, D.C., and they had people lining the streets. I don't know if they were preparing or whatnot, but they were definitely already starting to celebrate the inauguration of Donald Trump. And there were signs all up and down the street. Some of them that I saw said something to the effect, "Welcome home, Daddy," this type of stuff. It's pretty hilarious. What a great day. What a great day Monday is going to be. And if I do say so myself, just in the nick of time. Definitely could not take much more of these petty, these just absurd actions that President Biden, Kamala Harris, and their cronies are engaging in. And we're going to talk about some of those here in just a second. Wait till you see what Kamala Harris and Joe Biden did today. Just going to make your blood boil on some of the things they keep doing, some of the things they keep spending money on. It just seems like they just love to spend the money that we send to Washington. Typical woke Democrats. That's what they're all about, ladies and gentlemen. They just love to spend our money on whatever they think it needs to be spent on. Because it's not their money, they don't care. They don't care. They just spend money, and they think that is the solution to every problem that we have in society. Back on this finality, I guess you can call it, in this New York hush money case, if we can go with that term, the Stormy Daniels nonsense. Notice in this particular picture, you have I believe his name is Castellano. This is the former number 3 official at the Justice Department, the DOJ, that apparently quit his job at a nice, cushy, prestigious DOJ job, and he went to work with the New York prosecutor, Alvin Bragg, and of course, Letitia James. They want us to believe that this is something he wanted to do. And of course, it's been our thinking the entire time. Many reports have been published on this particular subject, that he's essentially he is Biden's right-hand man in this particular department, overseeing for President Biden this conviction against Donald Trump. Now, Donald Trump for a long time has tried to basically put off the verdict. He's been wanting to simply never have the verdict happen at one point. And now that it's went forward, the only good thing I can tell you about this is the fact that now they can finally appeal it. I mean, Donald Trump, in all fairness, has kind of wanted it both ways on this. At first, he wanted an immediate verdict. Remember, we've talked about this many times on this particular program, the fact that what he might have to do is get a mandamus issue in order to compel Judge Merchant to go ahead and actually follow New York law. New York law states you have to have an actual sentence within 1 year of a jury verdict, aka a conviction. However, now that this particular case has been officially adjudicated, in other words, the sentence has been pronounced in this case, that's great news as far as I'm concerned. I know the president is not happy about that. The whole purpose of this at this point was simply to label President Donald Trump elect as a felon. And unfortunately, he is technically a felon under New York law, which is unfortunate. But the good news is this. The good news is now President Donald Trump can appeal this outrageous case. He can now seek to have it thrown out first, of course, in the New York Court of Appeals, and he'll just keep appealing it on up. And I'm assuming at some point it will end up before the United States Supreme Court. But stay tuned. We'll see exactly how this goes. Another way to frame this, to look at this in a more positive way, is remember this. Not a doubt in my mind that had President Donald Trump elect not won this last election, what we would have seen at this particular hearing would be the incarceration of Donald Trump to Rikers Island. Not a doubt in my mind. If you listen to the comments from this Judge Merchant, he was very clear that he passed this, what they call an unconditional discharge, not because they wanted to help Donald Trump, not because of any kind of respect they wanted to give to Donald Trump. He mentioned the fact that essentially respect had to be paid to the office of the presidency. They knew they really had no choice. I did some checking on the computer with different AIs and just different resources I have. I could not find anyone that has ever in New York State history ever been issued an unconditional discharge like President Donald Trump received. So it's very unusual. If you listen to the words that Judge Merchant spoke as far as the way the statute is laid out and what the statute mandates in order to receive, aka an unconditional discharge they've been talking about, this case doesn't fit that. I mean, it's really clear that it does not fit what they intended when they passed that law in the state of New York. So obviously this case has been nuts from the beginning, and it's going to continue going down that road. The reason this was filed, if you remember, was one reason only, and that was to stop Donald Trump from getting to the White House again. And of course, in that regard, fortunately, they have failed miserably. Amen to that, right? They have failed. They have completely failed in that regard. And I, for one, could not be happier. And again, the reason they went forward with this case is, number one, they have to under New York state law. They really don't have any choice. They can't just leave this hanging out there. It's a violation of law. And again, as we talked about in this program, there's issues having basically this open case against a sitting president. You cannot have this situation go forward the way it is because there's a lot of problems. Number one, it would be a constitutional crisis, if you will. You cannot have let's just say a lowly state judge having some kind of pull, some kind of jurisdiction, if you will, over a sitting president of the United States. So there's just so many problems. They really had no choice short of just outright dismissing the case like Jack Smith did at the Department of Justice. And effectively, the case for Fannie Willis down there in Georgia, that case is all but dead, in my humble opinion. Again, we'll wait and see how this plays out, but I do intend on dissecting this case on another video in the future because I think it's interesting to listen to the words that were spoken by Judge Merchant. What a hack! What a complete political hack he is, and all these people that worked with him. But again, the good news is Donald Trump's coming into office, and all of their webs, all this little secrets that they've had, this grand conspiracy. You want to talk about a RICO case? This is RICO. This is the Biden administration, Harris administration, all these cronies working with them on the state and federal levels, working together. And what I would call racketeering. It was election interference. It is what we have known for some time that it is. And I, for one, can tell you this. The Bible teaches us that we have to forgive, right? Well, that's fine. I can forgive, but I'm not going to forget. And the problem is Joe Biden, the thing I can't stand about him and Kamala Harris, they have brought this lawfare to our country. And the problem with this, ladies and gentlemen, is this lawfare is something that can actually truly destroy our country. It's not just rhetoric. It's just not words. It's not something to say that for the sake of being salacious. This could destroy the United States of America. That's how Rome fell and other countries fell, is corruption. And corruption and lawfare, in my humble opinion, are synonymous. They're the same thing. So there's a lot more to this case as time goes on. And as I've said before, my opinion is the only way to stop this forever is Donald Trump has to go after the people that engage in this lawfare. I don't think he's going to be able to do that against Joe Biden, but he definitely can do it to anyone and everyone that has their fingerprints on this particular case, especially if Joe Biden does not grant the pardons that I told you he has to grant. Because of Joe Biden, Kamala Harris, for now on, any administration that leaves office is going to have to give a blanket, broad pardon to anyone and everyone that is effectively in their privity. That's just the way I see it. I don't think there's any other way around it. They have introduced this thanks to Joe Biden, Kamala Harris, and now it's a reality. Don't think it's a one and done. Once someone has rung a bell, that bell cannot be unrung. All right, switching over to, we had a video, I believe it was a series of videos, once or twice, 2 or 3 different videos, but it was on, and I hope I don't say her name wrong, but it's Agam Berger, Miss Berger. It was her first day. She's an Israeli, of course. It was her first day as an IDF soldier back on, what was that, October 7th, 2022. And we know that on this terrible day that you had all these individuals from Hamas cross their little concrete wall or whatnot, and they attacked all these kibbutz, and they killed a bunch of people. I mean, this was effectively Israel's 9/11, if you will. At any rate, as best as we know, she is still a hostage there in the Gaza Strip, we're assuming. The best hope for her release and the other hostages is right now. This reminds me of when President Reagan came into office. I don't know if a lot of you are old enough to remember that or not. Again, we're talking 1981, I believe. I remember clearly when he was being sworn into office, on one side of the screen, you had Ronald Reagan taking the oath of office. And on the other side of the screen, you could see the hostages. I believe there was 444 hostages at the time being loaded on an airplane and being released because, frankly, they were scared to death of Ronald Reagan and knowing that Ronald Reagan meant business and he was not going to stand for it. This is what we get when we have weak leadership like Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. It's a story as old as the country itself, really. When you have weak, ineffective leadership, the world goes to pot, and that's just the way it is, and that's exactly what happened, in my opinion, in part at least, with the situation over in Israel. So let's continue to pray for her, her family, and all of Israel for that matter. And let's hope that we're going to have a repeat of what we saw with President Reagan when he was sworn in office. Remember, Donald Trump has said very clearly that there would be hell to pay if these hostages, all the hostages, not just the American hostages, if they were not all free by the time he is sworn in office, there would be hell to pay. And I believe Donald Trump, and I believe what he says. And we're going to have to see how that we're going to see how it transpires. So stay tuned. I will definitely be following it right along with each and every one of us here. Also, if time allows, we're going to talk about Greenland and an op-ed in the Washington Reporter pertaining to Donald Trump's interest in acquiring Greenland. Good news. Carrie Underwood has agreed to perform for Donald Trump, and I guess for the country by extension, for his inauguration coming up this Monday on the 20th. It's very nice to see Donald Trump actually being accepted back into American culture, if you will. You know, before it was very difficult to get top entertainers to kind of sign on or kind of be part of the Trump train, if you will. And of course, that's no longer the case. So hallelujah for that. And that's definitely a blessing. I like Carrie Underwood. I like her music. And I believe this particular report said that, it says Carrie Underwood will perform America the Beautiful at Donald Trump's inauguration next week. And the 1970s hitmaker Village People will perform at 2 inaugural events. So you got the Village People and Carrie Underwood going to perform. And of course, Carrie Underwood, if you remember, she started her career at least from American Idol. She had during that competition gave her a definitely what you would call a lift in her career, and good for her. I like her. I like her music. She seems like a good person. Also want to briefly tell everybody that more bad news for Fannie Willis and her lover, Nathan Wade. They're out of Georgia, that BS RICO case, as we've talked extensively about on this particular program. The bad news for them, I mean, every news now pertaining to that case is more and more bad news. Obviously, the recent news was that the Georgia Court of Appeals actually removed Fannie Willis and her entire office there at the DA in Fulton County off of that sham case because of her relations with Nathan Wade. I mean, clearly there's at least the appearance of some kind of impropriety there, and the Georgia Court of Appeals knows that is improper and that cannot be allowed to stand the way that it was going to be allowed, at least by Judge Scott McAfee. So the more bad news for Fannie Willis is that the state Senate has now reauthorized the committee to look into Fannie Willis. Technically, the Senate committee, is designed to oversee all prosecutors in the state of Georgia, but the fact is the X, so to speak, is definitely over Fannie Willis. They were I would say she's the main target of that particular committee, as she should be. And bad news, they have decided to put more money and to reauthorize and refund that program, which I think is a very wise thing to do. Just as a quick note, says the Senate approved the resolution reauthorizing this committee, a 33-23 vote. And of course, as you guess, yes, it was a vote along party lines. How about that, huh? No surprise here. I'm sure you guys are not surprised either concerning that event. One other thing we're going to talk about today is the fires in California. We need to keep in our prayers all the people affected by the fires there in California. And don't misunderstand anything I say on this particular program. Trying to I don't know, chill down the fact that a lot of people are in dire straits. But I wanted to mention what to me seems very obvious. A lot of the homes destroyed in this particular fire, two things. Number one, they are definitely the fault of these woke democratic policies, laws, whatever. And they shouldn't be surprised that this has happened. I have a couple video clips that we're going to look pertaining to just that fact. And I'm curious what y'all think about it when we get to it. But I also wanted to mention, especially in Malibu and those places where all them homes burnt down right there at the coastline. I mean, you have multi-million-dollar homes, and yet you have the state of California under Gavin Newsom, as President-elect Donald Trump would say, asking the federal government, and I believe President Biden has said that he will fund it. Of course, it's not really up to him. It's up to Donald Trump as of next week. They want us to use our taxpayer money to pay and bail these people out of all this mess that they're in. And these are wealthy people, ladies and gentlemen, with multi-million-dollar homes. Here's an article that I come across today out of the New York Post, and it's titled, L.A. Millionaires Shell Out $2,000 an hour for private firefighters as overwhelmed cities abandons neighborhoods to the flames. Remember, because of the policies of the governor, Governor Newsom, if you will, it's a lot of factors, but it all boils down to the fact that they have these terrible woke ideologies, these policies. They were trying to save fish. They emptied out different reservoirs and dams they had. And instead of taking care of their people, they decided they would appease different Indian tribes, that they would appease people that said we needed to take care of some type of fish instead of taking care of their people by providing them the water that they need, especially in the event of some type of catastrophe like this. I mean, come on. What is going on with this? And I just wanted to point that out, that it's not all these people, but a lot of these people that have been victimized by these fires, these are wealthy, very wealthy people, especially all the movie stars you see on TV. As a matter of fact, I've always liked that show 2.5 Men. It takes place in Malibu, at least that's where it's supposed to be set. And a lot of the scenes they show during that movie, that is that same strip of Pacific Coast Highway that they have now shown on television many times. That's all burned up, unfortunately. So my point is this: why should taxpayers be sending all that money down for these wealthy multimillionaires? I don't think so. I think it's outrageous, and I just have to call it exactly the way I see it. And I'm sure that many of you probably share the view that I have on it. All right. So let me switch the screen right here, and that way you can hear the actual video. I want to take a look at last week's funeral for former President Jimmy Carter. Now, of course, Jimmy Carter just happens to be the first president that I remember when I was young. I know that, I believe when I was born, the president was Richard Nixon. The first one that I can readily remember, though, was Jimmy Carter. And I specifically remember the fact that he was a peanut farmer. It was something we talked about in elementary school, this type of thing. And I remember one of his final speeches that he gave on TV, similar to what President Biden did today. And obviously he was a good man. I definitely disagree completely with his politics. He was not a good president. That's very clear. And I'm sure that is what history is going to reflect. I like the fact he was a Christian. I like the fact that he was a good man. I don't think he was a friend of Israel. I think he had some misguided policies in that regard. Having said that, he did the best that he could do, at least that he thought was the best. And in that regard, I can salute him because he was a person that served in the role as president of the United States. So going to the funeral here, we have all of the living presidents, all 5 of them, and their spouses, with the exception of Michelle Obama. So the question is this: why did Michelle Obama not show up for this funeral? Now, let's take a look at a little bit of this together. Now, some of this...
First Lady Melania Trump at the National Cathedral.
Because there's music in the background, and with YouTube rules and stuff like that, I have to mute it. But you can see on your screen right here, President Donald Trump elect and Melania Trump.
Waiting, of course, for Bush.
I believe they were the first couple that showed up at this particular funeral event. You can see Donald Trump shaking hands with Al Gore, and there he is with Mike Pence. I thought that was kind of interesting because, as far as I can tell, that's the first time these two have met since they actually lost the last election. And of course, there was a lot of tension between Mike Pence, former vice president under Donald Trump in his first administration, a lot of tension between both of them gentlemen, but it seemed like they had a cordial, not necessarily an overwhelmingly friendly handshake, but they did greet each other just the same. Now, we're gonna fast forward here. Here's Barack Obama coming in. Notice he's not with Michelle Obama. Now, when they're all seated, I can explain to you very quickly and very clearly as to why as to why Michelle Obama did not show up. And it's probably something you can probably guess in the back of your mind as the reason. But just the same, it's really petty, and it's unfortunate that in our country she could not show up and support former President Jimmy Carter's family, and of course support the country. It's just kind of something we all do as Americans. We put aside our pettiness, our disrespect, and we come together for one another. And of course, you see former President George W. Bush coming in with his wife there. It's also striking to me just how we all get older as time flies by. We are all aware of that we all start looking different, right? I know in the last 5-6 years I've lost what was left of my hair. And of course, when I look at these presidents here, it's clear. You can see George Bush. He was just shaking the hand of Dan Quayle. That was Dan Quayle, his president, or rather vice president behind him. If you notice, I didn't see really any interaction with Barack Obama or President Trump. And of course, the Bushes and Trump do not have a warm relation. And here is Hillary Clinton, the former First Lady, former Secretary of State, with her husband, former President, of course, Bill Clinton of the 90s. And here they are greeting everyone. So they're greeting Al Gore, Mike Pence, their wives, let's just say the vice presidents and their wives on the back row. You don't really see any interaction as far as Barack Obama or Donald Trump again. And at the same time, notice that Barack Obama and Donald Trump seem really chummy, chit-chatting. But if you look at this particular picture right here, you don't see Barack Obama greeting the Bushes. It's just kind of weird. I mean, I understand it is a funeral, but at the same time, you just don't see what I would expect to see as far as people saying hello. Now, it's possible maybe they met backstage or back outside the church before they came in. Maybe there was some kind of private gathering ahead of time. I don't know. But it just seemed very odd and very weird. And of course, there's a lot of people talking about the fact that Donald Trump and former President Barack Obama were seeming very chummy. And of course, we know both of these two individuals can't stand each other. And there they are speaking right there. And of course, on the left-hand side, and this is important, the left-hand side, you'll see Melania Trump, because I'm about to make a point about it in just a second. Again, back on the Bushes right there. I'm going to forward a little bit to where you see Vice President Kamala Harris and her emasculated husband, Doug Emhoff. I can't stand these people. Here we go. There we go. Now, I just got a comment. This is supposed to be the guy that the Dems told us was the embodiment. He's the embodiment of how to be a masculine man, how to be strong, how a man should act. I just don't get that vibe, folks. I just don't get that vibe at all. And you can see Kamala Harris, of course, looking very stone-faced, very stoic is probably the best way to say it. And let's see how they take their seats. Now, she enters the aisle first, and then watch her. She pats her husband on the back and basically has him set on her left. All right. So they sit down. There's really no greetings, no eye contact with anybody. The fact that they're sitting in this row, I'm going to talk. There she is, by the way. Did you see that? She just turned her head. I want to rewind that. Look at this really close. Look at her turn her head. In just a second, she's going to see, boom, right there. She sees Donald Trump and Barack Obama chit-chatting, and her face, her grimace is hilarious. Here we go one last time. So they're going to start talking, and just when she pulls her head back here, okay, here it goes right there, boom, and boom, there's her grimace. You see that? It's like her face is closing, and she's like, oh, Lord, no, I can't stand this. That's what it came across to me. Wow, very testy. Very testy. Sapphire says Trump told Obama, I guess Hillary really does hate me. Yeah, probably. There's a funny meme that President Donald Trump elect posted on True Social. If time allows, we're going to take a look at that today. I think somebody reposted that on the X platform. It's pretty funny. Some of the memes out there. As far as Melania Trump is concerned, that you see, well, it's behind my face actually. You see. At times, she's sitting right to the left-hand side of her husband, Donald Trump. she's still pretty sore. She's pretty mad, and I don't blame her at Kamala Harris, Joe Biden, any of the Democrats, if you will, because they all engage in this lawfare. I mean, we say it sometimes as a joke. It's no joke to her. She had her home invaded with FBI agents, heavily armed. And as we've looked at the different at the paperwork pertaining to this, the actual search warrant, they were armed and they were authorized to use lethal force. They went through her personal items, her panty drawer, and other things along these lines. And I don't blame her. I'd be pretty mad too. A lot of people don't understand having that type of invasion in your home is extremely devastating. I luckily have never had that experience. I hope I never have that experience. But imagine if it could happen to a former, soon to be president of the United States and his wife, it can happen to any one of us if the people in power choose to be. And unfortunately, ladies and gentlemen, even in my personal life, I have had experiences on a much smaller level than this, that if you tick off the deep state, if you make somebody mad that has authority over you, they do anything they can to make your life miserable, especially if you carry some type of professional licensure. If you have, if you're making money and it's dependent upon the government in some way, they can make things very miserable for you. And of course, everything nowadays just about has to have a license that goes along with it. So let's go ahead and take a look at the seating chart. This is a good place to show what I've been talking about, and we can discuss as to why she didn't show up. Now, if you notice the way they're setting, and this is probably the reason why Kamala Harris, in all fairness, probably had her husband go to her left. If you look at the back row right here, you have the former president, like here's Bill Clinton, and to his left is Hillary Clinton, his spouse. And then you got the same thing going on. You got former President George W. Bush, and then his wife right to his left. Same thing with Barack Obama, sitting beside the wife of George W. Bush. Her name's escaping me for some reason. It's is it Laura Bush? But at any rate, his wife, Mrs. Bush. You got Barack Obama. Guess who would be sitting to the left of to the left of Barack Obama? Well, of course, it would be the nutty, manly looking Michelle Obama, right? And guess who would be right beside her to her left? And that would be President Donald Trump elect. We know that she has called him a racist, misogynist, all kinds of nasty, vile terms. And this is recent stuff. And clearly, my opinion, she did not want to sit and have to engage in conversation potentially with President Donald Trump. It just was something she was not willing to do. And this is the reason we see what we see. So the news can tell you whatever they want to tell you. I did have that one article we talked about that it was in BuzzFeed, and they kind of go around the situation. They never come out and directly say what I just said, but that's the reason. You can take that to the bank. It's all about the fact she did not want to sit beside President Donald Trump. And I'm just going to go on a limb here. I really don't think that President Donald Trump really cares. He didn't care too much if she got to sit next to him or not. I'm sure he doesn't give it a second thought. And it is what it is. One last thing I want to show you. Here's the President Biden coming in with his wife, Dr. Jill Biden, honorary title, of course. If you look, boom, right there. You have Kamala Harris had some papers she picked out of her seat and handed back to her. Of course, these two ladies do not like each other at all. I would submit none of them like each other. We're worth two shades, and you see exactly what happened. There was just minimal contact, minimal. I don't even think they looked each other in the eye. If you notice, Kamala Harris was looking down, and then when she looked up, she looked straight ahead. So she was looking down, and then she looked straight up after handing the First Lady, Jill Biden, Dr. Jill Biden, the paperwork. Interesting. Oh, yeah, thanks, Sapphire. It's Laura Trump. Laura Bush for George W. Bush's wife. Thank you, sir. I appreciate that. All right, so what do y'all think about that? Y'all agree with my assessment? I think it's real simple. I don't think there's any huge secret, if you will, as to why she didn't show up. Now, again, the official response from the former first lady, was that she was on vacation in Hawaii and she had some type of conflict that would not allow her to attend a president of the United States funeral. I, I don't believe it. I know you don't believe it. And I just think it's interesting. I think it's worth mentioning because it's just outrageous that she could not put aside the politics, the pettiness, the nastiness. If I'm playing devil's advocate and I'm looking at the other side of the issue, it is kind of hard to show up to a funeral. It's going to be interesting to see what happens next week when Donald Trump is actually inaugurated. It's very difficult to show up and to play nice and look normal with a individual that you have told the American people in very direct and stark terms that this guy is Hitler. This guy is a fascist. This guy is going to be the end of our country. And that's what they've done. So I guess I could understand it in that part. I mean, how can you have any respect for yourself and your own credibility? And you go off and you warn everybody that will listen to you that if Donald Trump's elected, it's all over for us. Fascism is here. Hitler is here. That was their words, not my words. So we shouldn't be surprised that she didn't show up if you think about it in that particular regard. All right. So let's go on and let's take a look at the J.R. Duke scroll. A few things I had here, and we're going to kind of bounce around. I like to talk about things as I have found them online. Well, we can thank our vice president, the one who just lost the election, for something fantastic she did today. As I mentioned at the beginning of today's broadcast, you had President Biden and Kamala Harris. They are all too excited to tell us the following. He says, with today's announcement, President Biden and I have now canceled student loan debts for over 5 million more. I'm adding the more Americans. Remember, they keep in open defiance of the U.S. Supreme Court telling them they cannot do this. They keep doing this. They keep giving them our money to pay off loans that they took out. And they think this is good. It says, as the Attorney General of California and a United States Senator, I stood up for students who fought to ease the burden. Let me see what she says here. To ease the burden of student loan debt, I have been proud to continue that work to create economic opportunity as Vice President of the United States. Isn't that something, right? As I wrote in my comment right here, and I think it's pretty well spot on. It's exactly the way that I feel about the situation. I said, this is to the VP Kamala Harris, thanks for giving away our money. I got to correct my spelling there. I said out money. Thanks for giving away our money for loans we did not take out. No wonder why you lost to Trump. I think that says it all, right? Just an absolute abomination. Just sickening. And then we wonder why we are $36 trillion dollars in debt. These people took out loans, went partying, studying, whatever they did or didn't do with all that money. They had a good time, 4, 5, 6, 7 years, whatever it was. Some other people decided, hey, I'll get a job as an apprentice. I'll get into plumbing, heating and air, electrical, auto repair, whatever. They started working. They started busting their butt. They chose not to accumulate those outrageous debt, and take on that type of debt. And now it looks like the people that were working as a tradesman person or whatever they chose to do is now going to have to foot that bill. Absolutely outrageous. Now, I will tell you, my opinion is those student loans are corrupt, and I would not encourage anyone to take out them student loans, period. I just don't care. Get a job and pay off those student loans. The government offering all this money for people to go to college, all it does is create these huge endowments for these universities. And these endowments keep getting bigger and bigger. And it's just simple economics 101. When you keep artificially, I will add, increasing demand by giving away all of these loans to students, these young kids, to basically a lot of them are just going off to party for 4, 5, 6, whatever years, and acquiring these type of debts. And listen, these debts you cannot get out of. I guess if Joe Biden's in office, you can get out of them. But technically, when you take out these debts, you can't get away from these debts. These debts are debts you cannot even bankrupt out of. Did you know that? You cannot file bankruptcy and get out of these loans. And in my opinion, that is one of the main problems with these loans. I believe these loans are corrupt, just prima facie, on their face. Even the Bible says you should forgive a debt after 7 years. And that's how, frankly, that's how our bankruptcy system is set up on. I mean, because at some point you get to a place where the debt is so big. These kids went in and they borrowed $100,000 for, I don't know, some type of marine study nonsense, right? And these jobs pay $15, $20 an hour, 25 an hour. There's no way for these people to realistically pay back that type of money during their lifetime, especially if they're going to have a life, if they're going to have a spouse, if they're going to have children, if they're going to buy a home. So yes, there are some serious fundamental problems with these loans, but the solution is not to make all of the other taxpayers that did not take out these loans to pay for these loans. I mean, it's just absolutely insulting. You guys agree? I'm curious if y'all agree or not. Sapphire, tell me. You agree, disagree with my take on it? It's just something that should not be allowed. We'll see exactly where that ends up with Donald Trump coming in. I believe Donald Trump's going to be able to reverse a lot of that. If nothing else, they can go to court right away and get an injunction from one of the judges to stop that. I don't think that that's going to be that big of a deal to stop that. All right. So let's go ahead and start talking about them wildfires out in California. There's a lot to talk about here. As you can predict, these woke Democrats, ladies and gentlemen, guess what they're blaming? Yeah, guess what they're blaming for these fires? You guessed it. They're blaming this climate change nonsense. Everything nowadays, if there's a problem, it's climate change. Everything's climate change. And I've stated many times on my channel exactly how I feel about that nonsense. And it has to, I kind of echo a lot of what President Donald Trump says, this green new scam, this nonsense. And I have to be careful what I say here because YouTube does have terms and conditions, and I want to honor what they want and don't want on their platform, which again, in my opinion, is unfortunate and it should not be that way. But I'm going to be very careful with what I say. I think everybody pretty understands where I'm going with this. But this was on CNN, and it's interesting to listen to. Let's take a quick peek at it because effectively, I'm not alone. There's a lot of people that do not believe in this climate change crap. They just don't believe in it. Matter of fact, a quick side note, you had President Joe Biden in one of his farewell speeches today made that exact comment that this is clearly the most important existential crisis facing the world, facing America. Can you believe that? These clowns want to destroy our economy, this country that allows us to feed ourselves and our families, to stop everyone's prosperity, because these goofballs think that we're warming the climate by 1 degree in the next 50 years or whatever type of nonsense. Look, when it comes right down to it, it doesn't matter what you believe. These are the facts. I don't believe they've proven we are responsible for anything. And even if we are responsible, how does it change if we change our behavior, but places like China, who's putting on 1 or 2 brand new coal fire factories a week online, how in the world is that going to make any difference when they are not changing their behavior? We all breathe the same air. The world is all connected with the same atmosphere. If we stop and they increase, all we do is end up destroying ourselves and our economy and our way of life. These goofs want us to keep cutting back and basically stop living. They want us to stop eating hamburger. They want us to stop living our lives. And yet at the same time, these are the same people that fly around in these huge jets and they have their own yachts, and it's just the same old nonsense. Do what I say, not as I do. And for me, no way, no sir, no how. So let's take a quick peek at this and then we can talk about it.
I don't think Americans are making this connection. And the way we can see this in right here and now, take a look at the monthly change in Google searches. Look at the searches for wildfire. up 2,400%. My goodness gracious. This is the most amount of people searching for wildfires ever going back since Google Trends began back in 2004. But look at climate change. Look at the change. It doesn't go hand in hand with wildfires. It's actually down. It's down 9%. And I also looked in California. There has been no increase in the number of searches for climate change. So the bottom line is this. Americans are definitely interested in learning about these wildfires. They're interested in following the news about the wildfires, but they are not making that connection with climate change. That's the bottom line here.
That's a really key metric you're looking at there.
Yeah, the reason we're not making the connection is because we don't believe there is a connection. We believe we're being sold more nonsense, like they've been trying to sell us almost about every single divisive subject that comes before us.
Overall, Americans being worried about climate change. What have we seen over time?
Yeah, you know, we have seen a lot of extreme weather events over the last few decades, right? Hurricanes, heat waves, wildfires. You might expect that Americans worry about climate change with climate change, worry a lot. You go back to 1991, it was 35%. Now, it was a little bit higher in 2007, a little bit higher in 2022. But look at this. In 2023, the last time we have data, 39%. That is not statistically significantly different from this 35%.
Ladies and gentlemen, these people are brainwashed, and they want me and you to be brainwashed. Trust me on this. It's nothing but brainwashing. They want, look how young that guy is right there. He doesn't know. He doesn't know the reality of what's going on. When I was a kid in school, I was taught clearly in class that right now today, we were going to likely be under 6 to 10 feet of ice. We were going to have another ice age. What they told us was that, hey, the amount of years between the last ice age and today was exactly 30 years, and that's how fast the climate can change. Everything's getting colder, and they were worrying about it, right? Then you get into the 80s, and in the 80s, they were trying to change it, and it became, what was the term? We all know what it was. It was global warming. And then you had these politicians standing out in the snow saying that I'm running for president, and we have to stop this global warming, and everybody's laughing at it because the snow is building up on their shoulders as they're given this speech, and everybody's freezing their backsides off. I mean, you know, it's just nonsense, and everybody can see it. So what do? They changed it again. Now it's climate change. Before it was we're heading to an ice age, and then it's getting too hot, and they can't get it right. So what do they say? Okay, it's just climate change. The funny thing is, when you look up the word climate in the dictionary, depending on the dictionary you use, it's pretty well describes that the word means what is the weather day to day over time. By definition, climate does change. Nothing ever stays the same, ladies and gentlemen. Again, they just don't want us to think for themselves. And listen, if there is climate change, if there is something to worry about it, fine. Let's have a discussion about it. Let's find practical solutions to it. But what they don't tell you is there's an alternative way to think about anything. Let's just pretend that it is true, the climate change, all right? We're just going to say it is true. It's kind of like being fat. There are benefits to being fat. It's a different way to think, but it's true. There are some health benefits to being fat. Specifically, if you're older and you have a little weight, there are situations, times that it can benefit you, especially if you get sick and you're not able to eat regularly, this type of thing. It's like that with climate change. And my point is this: do you think anyone in Siberia is going to be complaining because the temperature is 1 or 2 degrees warmer? Instead of it being minus 70 degrees, it's going to be minus 68 Fahrenheit in the next 50 years. That's exactly what I'm saying. I have waited for traffic lights out in just the day, just the daytime, just like you do during the course of a year, right? I know for a fact the actual temperature outside changed more than 2 or 3 degrees waiting for a traffic light to change. These people are nuts. And when you say something like I just said, they call you a denier. You're an election denier. You're a climate change denier. You're a denier. You're an idiot. You can't think for yourself. When you see people, if you look throughout history and you look at all the people that has went after free speech, has went after people like me, voicing my opinion, voicing the way I see something, every single time in history, the people trying to stop your speech are the evil side, the wrong side, the side trying to take away your liberty. It's just the way it is. And these people that give us the weather, you'll notice there'll be like a badge on the screen that says, was it AWS, American Meteorology Society, something along them lines. One of the rules they have is that if you say something like I just said, or if you don't wholeheartedly, full throat endorse and advocate and preach the dangers of climate change, you cannot have a credential as a meteorologist, meaning you cannot support your family. Your family stops eating. You are not allowed to participate. We don't like the way you think. We're going to pull your credentials, and now you're homeless. It's just the way our society is. It's nonsense, and it needs to stop. And listen, if I'm wrong, that's fine. Prove it. Show me. But I will tell you this. I know for a fact from my history books that back in the 1930s, aka the Dust Bowl, it was so hot then that parts of Oklahoma and Texas, they were making their own weather. It was so hot, they were developing their own tornadoes, if you will, their own dust cyclones, aka the Dust Bowl. Google it, and you'll see what I'm talking about. Also, I believe it was in the last year or two, they did not like the fact that the weather was hotter in the 30s and in the 40s here in the United States. So what did they do? They literally erased the records, the weather records. It did not fit the story they're trying to sell us. I would say the story they're trying to stick down our throats. They didn't like it, so they simply erased all that data. And the reason they erased it, at least the reason they give us, is because that data cannot be trusted. Back then, the instruments were not as sophisticated as what we use today. This is the world we're living in, ladies and gentlemen. If you Google this information, you'll see that I'm absolutely correct about it. And that is, it was hotter in the 30s and the 40s than it is today. And I mean, I can go on and on about this entire subject, and I won't. But I will tell you, it's incumbent on each and every one of us to think for ourselves and make our own choices and our own decisions and not just swallow the indoctrination they give us all the time. Sapphire says climate change is real, but not how the government is telling us. I think that that's fair. I don't disagree with that. I don't disagree with it, but I will say that we need to be aware of what they're trying to stick down our throats and make us obey, make us believe. It's nonsense, and I'm not falling for it. When you look at this guy that on this report we just looked at from CNN, that's essentially what he's telling us. Hey, if you don't believe this, like according to this poll, less people are buying into this climate change nonsense. And what's he saying? He's saying you're stupid. You're stupid. Just like everybody that voted for Trump. These people want you to believe they're stupid. If you voted for Trump, you're stupid. If you don't believe that the election was 100% fair in 2020, and if you questioned it or anything like this, you're stupid. If you, whatever it is they want us to buy, believe, do, if we don't comply, they hammer us accordingly. And that goes back to COVID. That goes back to everything. It's just the way it is. And it's extremely unfortunate. And thank God we still have some type of freedoms right now where I can say what I'm saying, at least on the X platform. I can say more. And I have a lot more to say. And I think I've mentioned I'm in the process of working on a Patreon channel and stuff like that, where I can really tell you what I'm thinking. I don't have to worry about anything that comes out of my mouth, but stay tuned for additional information on that. Here is the reason that they're having these problems in California right now. It has nothing to do with climate change. It has nothing to do with any of the nonsense they're trying to sell us. The woke legacy media is trying to sell us. Has nothing to do with. This is what it has to do with. They will not allow what we call normal common sense forest management techniques. In other words, you take out the underbrush, you take away dead stumps, dead branches, you harvest one tree, you leave the other tree, you harvest the next tree, and on and on and on. They don't want nothing touched because they're going to tell us, oh, there's some insect that we might kill or we might affect. And then boom, what you see going on right now, unfortunately, is the result. But let's take a look at this video because I think this will give you an example. Look at all this underbrush right here.
This is
All
what
these
your
dead
forest
trees.
really looks like. That's why when there's a fire, there's total devastation because they don't have control burns no more. Look at all that ground matter.
Okay, there you go. You see exactly what I'm trying to talk about. I don't know if you could hear this guy. He was talking kind of low. He was, and I'm just paraphrasing, but this is the real reason you're seeing the forest fires. They're not allowed to remove the underbrush. They're not allowed to remove or to clean any of that stuff out. They no longer have what they call controlled burns. They used to go around, prepare an area safely with fire breaks and whatnot, and then they would burn off an area. That's the way it has always been in history, is these natural burns. God set it up to where something is hit by lightning or whatnot. It catches on fire, every so often, and it burns out this underbrush and it keeps everything healthy. It's just the way that it's designed, the way nature is designed. Unfortunately, with these woke Democrats, these idiot policies, they're not allowed to do that in California. Now, here in my home state of Florida, Governor DeSantis, they're always burning stuff. And I don't want to say always, I don't want to exaggerate, routinely they're burning stuff. I live close to one of these state parks here, and they have a lot of, I guess you'd call it like swampy areas around here, like you would expect in Florida. Periodically, I don't know if it's every 2 years, 3 years, or whatnot, but I will see smoke at the horizon. You'll see these controlled burns. They burn off that underbrush in order to prevent this type of nonsense from occurring. I mean, it's just common sense. And I think I have a video of this here in a minute, but we've had Donald Trump a long time ago telling us about these exact facts that if they continue with these policies, this was going to be the end result of it. And it's just it's almost like it's just easy to predict. It's not rocket science to figure this out. Here's another guy by the name of Steve Hilton, kind of reiterating some of this. And there's a lot of people that would like to see Steve Hilton. He's currently, in part, I should say, a Fox News contributor. They like to see him run for governor of California and defeat news scum and remove him. So let's listen to what he has to say.
How could that happen?
Then we can
you
talk
just
about
had
it.
another example of the vacuum of leadership here in California, here in Los Angeles. That's why people, as well as being so devastated and fearful of the future, are angry. The level of rage is something like I've never seen before. In putting together the plan that I'll lay out later this morning, we'll discuss in a second, I've been speaking to a lot of people about what went wrong. And so many questions are now emerging. Let's just take that massive issue of running out of water. And people are saying, well, how could that happen? I've been talking to sources within the Department of Water and Power, and there are real questions about that emptying of the reservoir and the contracting process that led to that taking so long and costing so much. I've been talking to retired fire chiefs about the lack of communication when they knew that the reservoir was empty and there wouldn't be enough water, but the fire department wasn't told about that. If they had been told about that, they could have requested water tenders to provide the water that firefighters need. I asked my source, how long would it take to get the kind of number of water tenders you need for this situation in Southern California? He said, well, maybe a couple of hours. And that's the terrible thing. So much of this, the scale of this devastation, could and should have been avoided.
Isn't that the truth, right? I like the way this guy talks. I agree with most of what he says. And when it comes to these fires and this nonsense going on right now in his home state, he's absolutely correct, ladies and gentlemen. Just ridiculous that they have been allowed to get away with this for all this time. So I had one video that I wanted to show us too that I think is pretty cute and kind of a little bit on the funny side, if you will. I really hate to make jokes with this type of serious fire going on, but it's definitely spot on and it's very important. and here it, well, that's one of them, but it's important because it just shows how absurd all of this nonsense is. Now, there's a couple cuss words in here, so I want to warn anybody with sensitive ears. I try to find videos that basically don't have anything profane in there, but if you're sensitive to that, I just want to give you kind of a heads up. But this is an AI generated video, and it's kind of funny. At least I find it funny.
My name is Gavin Newscomb, and I just wanted to let you know that I'm the useless piece of shit responsible for your home burning down. So just keep giving me your insanely high taxes and keep voting Democrat so I can keep burning this motherfucking place to the ground. Thank you.
It's bad. I mean, it's tough. It's I feel sorry for these people. It's not something necessary to laugh at, but at the same time, I don't know what else to do sometimes except laugh at the absurdity of these woke Dems, these just woke ideologues that think they know how to run everything. They think they know better than you, better than me, how to run our lives and how to take care of us. Like it's their job to take care of us from cradle to grave. Just nonsense, complete foolishness. Thank God that Donald Trump is on his way back to the White House. So I want to make sure I leave everybody on a positive note, and that is this is going to be a great year in 2025. I have no doubt God is about to pour out a bunch of blessings on our country and on each and every one of us. I think one of the most important things we can do is to keep talking about this nonsense, talking about these failed policies, and frankly, just encouraging these woke Democrats to think about this nonsense coming out of their mouth, what they're trying to do to our society, and just pointing out to them, and especially our children, our younger generation, this is not the way to prosperity. They need to learn to think for themselves. That overall, ladies and gentlemen, is the goal of schooling in a nutshell, is to teach each and every one of us to think. Unfortunately, a lot of these kids end up going to these colleges, and these colleges do not teach you to think. They are nothing but what I would call indoctrination machines. These so-called professors, these tenured professors, they do nothing but basically put seeds, and they're indoctrinating our children. It's really just that simple. And then we wonder why, coming from all these supposedly wonderful colleges, we have a bunch of commies coming out of these places. Absolutely outrageous. Make sure there's no questions in the chat. Sapphire, thanks for joining me today. I like Steve too, my friend. I definitely like him. So thanks for you being here. Thanks, Rose, for you being here, young lady. Everybody in the chat, if I missed anybody, I'm sorry about that. I know we've had about 6 or 7 people on X, our friend on Twitch, and then my family on YouTube. Thank y'all so much for being here. Until we meet again, I hope God blesses each and every one of you and your families. Trust me, things are going to be great as Donald Trump makes America great again, and we can help him do that in our own way each and every day. So I hope that everybody has a good rest of your evening and a good rest of your week. Just that simple. Like to always say, keep that mind free. Never give up, my friends. And until next time, I am J.R. Dukes.